All right. So thanks everyone for joining us here today. We are recording and streaming live on LinkedIn Live, and we were recording here. This podcast will be available for consumption after the fact on your favorite podcast directories, Spotify, Apple, and so forth. And today we have a great guest. His name is Devrin Carlson-Smith. Devrin is an entrepreneur and adventurer. He's got more than 25 years of building and growing businesses with cutting edge technology. He lives in Park City, Utah, so he's not too far from us. He's been here since 2015 after 15 years in Manhattan. Devrin has worked many places across the world and brings some really interesting experience working with large and small companies, building companies, selling them. He worked with Microsoft. He's built companies he's built and worked with companies including the Publicis Group, Omnicom, Chiat Day, Droga 5, which was acquired by Accenture. And I'm really interested to hear Devrin's story. This is long overdue. Michelle and I met Devrin just maybe in the last 2 months. And, Michelle and I have been doing these AMAs and AMA webinars, and Devrin was one of the guests one of the audience members that we met. And we had a little contest, and we forgot to announce who the winner of the contest was during the webinar. And funny enough, Devrin was the only person that asked about it. And so Devrin was lucky enough, actually, we were the ones that were lucky, to award him the prize of 30 minutes with Michelle and me to talk about career and tech and all of this great stuff. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome Devrin to the stage. And we're looking forward to a great conversation. Devrin, come join us.
Thank you, guys. Great introduction.
Devrin.
I will say it's great meeting you guys as well. What started off as just a webinar conversation has grown into quite a dynamic continuation of that, and a chance for us to get to know one another.
I agree. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
Devrin, you were one of my favorite persons. We've become fast friends here over the past few weeks, and I just got to tell one quick story. Michelle and I did this little hack of a guerrilla marketing thing at a recent tech conference here in Salt Lake City. And we set up a little booth, a little unpaid booth, hence guerrilla marketing. And we invited a bunch of founders and executives. And Devrin was the coolest one to kind of just hang out with us for like 2 solid hours. And it was awesome. We have pictures to prove it. And we had the little sombrero hats and everything for our founders fiesta. So anyway, that was a really good time, Devrin.
That's great. Well, thanks for inviting me on the show, guys, today. I know we've got some topics to cover. I'd love to share what I can and be of resource, not just for this call, but anybody who's listening in later on. If they had questions and so on, certainly I'm happy to field those.
Awesome. Well, Devrin, why don't we just kick it off? I gave a brief intro on kind of your background, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about your journey, kind of set the stage, and we can go from there.
Sure. The topic of this session is all around the entrepreneurial spirit and how people have been in the workforce and thinking about ways that they can expand their network and also their job opportunities. And you guys asked me to kind of share a little bit about, how I got up to, becoming an entrepreneur for the last 17 years and what that looked like. And I can give you a quick snapshot of that because I think it's relevant as job seekers and people who are in the workforce looking to maybe change careers or looking for a new opportunity to think about what kind of skill sets are super transferable and become valuable, right? For employers, because nobody just wants a person sitting in a chair, empty suit. They want somebody who's proactive, involved. So, my journey is not really unique. There's a lot of people who've had a similar path, but it really has been unique for me. I've had a lot of great successes, but I've also had, tons of failures too. And I think it's quite relevant to stay grounded and recognize that the failures and how you respond to those are almost as important as your successes. And if you choose the path of entrepreneurialism, you're going to have more failures than you were expecting if you took a maybe more conventional path in a regular business. So just setting that stage there that, being an entrepreneur means that you have to be dynamic, you have to be adaptable, and you're going to have to live with, ups and downs, right? But that's fine. The other part that I think was interesting is that I didn't set out to become a C-level executive. My goal, 25, 28 years ago was not, hey, I want to be sitting in a C-suite. I just said I wanted to be growing businesses and be in an area where I can make the right decisions and I can get involved with as many business units as I can. And over time, I ended up finding that that was kind of what happened. And so, I've now been in a C position for, I guess, the last 7 or 8 years, and really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. But one of the things that I think was consistent throughout my entire career path has really been this passion for technology. I remember when I first got exposed to technology in the mid 90s, the internet wasn't really taking off yet. It was still nascent. It was still kind of clunky and difficult. I knew I wanted to be in technology and I didn't really know how, but I said, I'm going to learn about it. And for those of you who've been around that time or read about it, the internet was basic and there was not a lot of infrastructure out there. It was dial up. They were building cell phone networks, Wi-Fi networks. They were laying undersea cables for fiber optics. And that was really the job opportunity. And so that's where I started. I went to the biggest telco operator, telecommunications operator, who was putting in this infrastructure. And I worked for them and learned about how the backbone was created on this internet space. And I loved it. It was pretty cool. And that's where it started.
Yeah, awesome. You told us a story before about, you coming from Australia and coming to, find opportunity in New York. And this is about like right before 9/11. In fact, you mentioned that you literally witnessed like in person, line of sight, that tragedy, that disaster. And at the time, you mentioned that it was sort of a crisis situation, not just obviously for everyone in the country and the world, but for yourself. And maybe you could just kind of give us a little bit of a background there and kind of what happened there and why did you choose to stay and
Right.
pursue opportunity here in the United States versus go back home during that crisis situation. You mentioned you had no apartment at the time, you had no place to live, you had no job, you were just trying to
Yeah.
figure it out, like many of us today, right? And so I would love to hear that story.
Sure. It was one of, I think, Eric, the two breaking points or pivotal turning points in my career. And we'll talk about those. Um, the first one was I was on my way back from London. I was working for Cable and Wireless, and we had been transferred from Australia to London to work on a very large global e-procurement project. And that was going great. It was with Accenture. We were learning a lot, and we were really, really putting in some great e-commerce technology back in 2000. I then had a chance. I was traveling back home to Australia, and I stopped off in New York. I realized I had a U.S. passport. I'd never used it. I grew up in Australia and recognized, hey, wait a minute, I could actually work here if I wanted to. And I was intrigued and fascinated by New York City. So I started to start looking for job opportunities, despite the fact that I had a position back at home waiting for me. And I got going, and it was really tough. If you remember, the dot-com bust was happening around
Hmm.
2000. The technology was not a popular word. You were really kind of shunned if you were working in tech at the time. Things were imploding, and it was like a really bad kind of conversation, maybe similar to some other categories that are going to come back. And I remember at the time I had one interview. I got an interview with Microsoft, and I went in, had a great interview. They said they wanted to see me to come back again for a second interview. And I went home prepared, and I was on my way to the office for the second interview on the Tuesday, the 11th of September, 2001. And I was living in a friend's apartment, just taking over. They were on vacation. And I remember getting up, preparing, getting ready to walk out the door and get on the subway, and the plane literally went over the building and crashed right into the World Trade Center about 20 blocks away. And I never forget the scene. I ran to the roof. I started taking photos, and I was there for almost an hour and a half, just kind of watching what was going on. And it blew my mind. I mean, like it did the rest of the world, but to see it that close with my own eyes really put a powerful, feeling in me. But it was one of confliction because I didn't know like what's going to happen. Am I going to stay in New York? Or should I stay? This is just a crisis. And so fast forwarding, I stayed another 10 days, just trying to figure out what to do next. And I remember picking up the phone and calling Microsoft and saying, hey guys, I don't even know if you're still going to be practicing or reopening your business offices, but if you are, I'd like the job. I want to come in. And they said, in fact, yes, we're resuming our business practices. We'd like you to come in. And I got the job 3 days later, and that was October 4th, 2001. And that started what became a very pivotal part of my career, being at Microsoft in New York City for 5 years.
So, I mean, did you even consider going back at that point?
Yeah, I did, because it was really challenging. I was saying to myself, look, I don't have an apartment. I don't know anybody here. The city is in real crisis. They need people to, jump in. This is going to be a multi-year recovery plan. Am I ready for that? Emotionally, it was just devastation, as you can imagine. And I remember saying to myself, I'm like, you know what? New Yorkers are tough. These guys are not shirking their responsibility. I'm not a New Yorker yet, but I actually want to jump in. I actually want to help. I want to see if I can make my mark when the city's at its lowest, not come in when it's all unicorns and rainbows. I want to come in when it's at its worst. And if I can build it up and if I can get myself established and make an impact, then that's where I'd rather be. I'm not going to run away and go back to a safe spot if I can do something here.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there about sort of the opportunities that arise in a crisis situation, right? What does it say about the the word in Mandarin for crisis is some combination of opportunity and threat or
Oh, wow.
disaster. Yeah. Um, anyway, you ended up working with Microsoft, and you told a story about seeing the opportunity. It sounds like you saw the opportunity there because it was a crisis situation. You weren't going to go back to a safe place, but now it's like fast forward a bit, you end up working for Microsoft, and at some point you come to basically seeing an opportunity and pitching Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. What was that about? What was the opportunity that you saw that
Yeah.
maybe they didn't see?
Well, I think this is when my, entrepreneurial spirit started to shine, because in a huge company like Microsoft, you can either get absorbed into your daily job and just go through the motions and keep going, or you can find spot opportunities and use the horsepower of the big organization to help you get something done that hasn't been achieved before. And so when I got there, they were basically we were selling shrink wrap server software products. And we were given an account list and looking at what's going on. Yet most of the accounts were businesses that were in the media and entertainment space. And they weren't thinking about software and databases and integration and development tools. They're thinking about, how do I actually take my tape-based asset media companies with libraries of content? How do I digitize that? How do I rights protect it? How do I create new business models? You got to remember, there was no CNN website. There was no MTV websites. They didn't have streaming services. And if you think about it, at the time, the only players in that space that were kind of there were, the folks that are kind of, AOLs or Yahoo or eBay or Adobe, some early Google. These were not business change agents able to help big organizations navigate. The only two that were there were Microsoft and IBM.
Yeah. So what ended up where did you see the opportunity? And I'm just really curious about that whole interaction of you pitching Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer
Yeah.
on some idea. Like, did they not see the opportunity, or were they aware of it, or did you sort of, how do you get Bill Gates to say, yeah, great idea, let's run with that?
It's crazy. It was crazy. I mean, I guess I wasn't, shell shocked by these guys. They are big names, but I had access to them, and they kept coming to New York wanting to meet these big customers. And we looked at what we were doing. We said, you know what, the opportunity here is we should create a specific vertical just for media and entertainment. And Microsoft had 12 other verticals: oil and energy, automotive, financial services, accounting. There was a couple of them, but they had nothing for media and entertainment. And we're looking at this going, why can't we just go after the biggest players in media, advertising, publishing, record labels, and anything else that fits that mold? And why don't we wrap that in a new vertical segment? And let's go and talk to them about line of business solutions that are meaningful to them, not just talking about software, right? Because one of the things I learned is that technology does not sell product. You have to be able to solve a business problem with these products. So we got this story together. We put a loose business plan. Bill and Steve were in town, and we got together with them and said, guys, we can turn this into another vertical. There's demand there. We don't have to add too much to the bottom line here, and we can grow this thing significantly. And they completely took it on board. It took them less than 48 hours to make a decision. And there was money inserted, and all of a sudden we had a new vertical segment, and everything changed. Everything. The accounts I was working on at the time were Time Warner, News Corp, Viacom, and Disney. 4 massive media accounts in New York City, all of which were struggling with the same things. They didn't know how to tackle what was this huge digital wave coming at them, and they had no one to trust and talk to. And that's what we set up. We went and talked to them. We shared with them where we think the vision was. And to Bill's credit, Bill Gates, he would insert himself to talk about not what was being sold today, but he would talk about what was called N plus 10 or N plus 20, which is here's what's happening 5 to 10 years from now. Here's what's happening 20 years from now. And he would come into these very senior leaders, Bob Iger. I remember sitting with Bob Iger and Bill, and people at Time Warner, and he would tell the stories of where he thinks the direction was going. And he published a book called The Road Ahead, which is, if you look back on it, so many of those prophecies have come true.
Yeah, I remember reading that book back in the days, but and part of it is, I imagine you talking with, sort of presenting your ideas and the opportunity, and it's almost, it feels like it's kind of equivalent to a job interview, right? You're telling a story, you're showing an interview, showing a sort of demonstrating a vision, and you're kind of thinking out ahead of what the possibilities might be and why you're the one that they should invest in to kind of execute on that. And I'm just wondering, what put you in the position there to kind of succeed? Like, what was how were you able to kind of sort of see what was coming and anticipate, get them to invest in your idea and you as a person to be the one to execute on that?
Remember, it wasn't just me. There was a group of us who all had the same idea, right? So
Yeah.
we went and presented this as a case. But I think our mindset at the time was, what do we have to lose, right? The economy needs this. These are the biggest players. We're the biggest vendor. Why can't we be the ones to solve this, right? It was almost like, prove me wrong before we have to prove it right. This was just something we were going to try. And I guess that's kind of been my mindset the whole time, is just like, you have to have this blind curiosity to want to see what's around the corner, to want to push it, and to want to drive towards something, new. And technology allows you to do that. That's the nature of technology. It's always pushing the boundaries. So I didn't have a problem going to Bill and saying, this is what we needed to do. And it was very quick afterwards that we started getting immediate traction with these clients, because we were doing something for them that they really had nobody else talking to them about. Right?
Yeah.
And Devrin, how large did you grow that division, help grow it to?
So the division ended up acquiring and adding on more pieces. So we started with just the M&E customers. Then we had all the advertising for holding companies. Then we had the book publishers. Then we had the record labels. And eventually they added the telcos into that. And that grew to about a $300 million business, which inside Microsoft didn't even move the needle.
But it's amazing though. From 0 to 300 million, that's a huge growth.
Right. A lot of that is enterprise agreements, like they're buying the same desktop software anywhere in their operating systems and so on. But then to add server products on top of it and developer tools, like it just grew exponentially. And I think it's one of their bigger verticals today, and so on. But it was just magical to watch this first round. And I think what really happened in the transition to the next phase of that was, once we got the media companies going, they became self-sufficient, and that was our goal: get them to a point where they're self-sufficiency. We also had Accenture as our services arm, because Microsoft doesn't really have services, but we partnered with Accenture. So Accenture would come in after we did the technology pitches together, and then they would do the change management with these organizations, and we could step out. And eventually what ended up happening was they said, okay, those guys are off and running. Now let's look at the big four holding companies for the advertising space. That's IPG, Omnicom, Publicis, WPP, and a little bit of Dentsu and Havas. And they were 5 years behind the media guys. They hadn't even started to really embrace this yet. And so this was this next big, hugely lucrative opportunity, because if you remember at the time, advertising was pretty much television, print, and outdoor, right? Those are the main ways of advertising products. There was no digital back then. So they were curious, but they didn't know what to do. And so it was kind of like cookie cuttering the same approach to the holding companies: earn their trust, speak in their language, understand their business problems, and understand how they make money currently, so that you could potentially augment what they were doing and give them a playbook so that they could go forward.
Yeah, we live in really interesting times right now, because the cycles for revolutions are just shortening.
Unbelievable.
Right. It's crazy. So, we saw the internet revolution back in, the turn of the century there. And, folks like yourself have seen the opportunity. And now I think we're seeing another one, right? Now we have all this infrastructure in place, have all these apps, we have the devices, and, so, kind of taking some of those lessons of your ability to kind of see that revolution in the past and, see the opportunities that come out of that. Let's fast forward to today, where we're seeing other revolutions. And, how can people start to think about ways to position themselves to really get on that wave, whatever that wave might be, because there's just so many revolutions that are going on. We're going to see more here in the next 5 to 10 years.
For sure.
And so how can folks prepare themselves for that? And I guess, how do you think about that for yourself as well?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is I like to recognize patterns, right? Patterns exist in our daily lives everywhere. And it's whether it's a pattern of driving to the office, whether it's a pattern of managing your family, or in your business, cycles of change, right? If you've been in the business long enough, you're going to see things go in cycles. And the trick is to start recognizing cycles, because the human nature is good at identifying something that works and repeating that if it's something that you have come across in the past. We are at a point in our life cycle of 25, 30 years of this internet digital wave where things are starting to repeat themselves. And what is happening now, I think, with the AI revolution, to me, I've only ever seen twice. One was the first introduction of TCP/IP and the internet itself. That was the biggest change, and we've come into that information age. The only other one that it's been even close, which I don't think has been as big, but it certainly has been impactful, has been the mobile iteration, which came out in 2007 when the iPhone launched, and the whole realm of that. We're now starting with AI. And remember, we're not even 1 year old with the release of ChatGPT, which comes out November 30th, will be 1 year, if you can believe it. And this is as transformational as anything else I've seen in my 25 plus years in the industry. And as part of that, that's a pattern. And so to your point about the adoption curve and how fast we're going to need to take some of this technology and apply it, it's going to be important. But it's also the same thing that you're seeing happening now. Enterprises know it's going to be valuable. They know it's coming. They know it's going to impact their business, but they're still uncertain how to embrace this, how to learn about it, how to get through what I like to call, the comprehension and the competency. First, you got to comprehend what the heck it is. And secondly, you've got to gain some competency by, starting to test it yourself.
It seems like the technology is moving so fast and it's adapting so fast that we as humans need to be able to, maybe a key skill is learning to be just as adaptable. I don't know. It feels like the technology is adapting faster than we are as humans. And I don't know where that's going to put us. And, how do we how do we ensure that we are sort of leveraging that and again riding that wave?
Right. Well, this is where I want to maybe for people at home to think about how can they best prepare for the next round of iteration, but also maybe embrace some parts of the entrepreneurial journey into their job story. Right. Everyone has a job story. I found in my hiring career that I have gravitated more or less towards people that have also had an entrepreneur mindset. And that doesn't mean to say that they had to be entrepreneurs. And let's define that. Just because you haven't been a co-founder or put something out there, your own product, doesn't mean you're not an entrepreneur. You can be an entrepreneur by, setting up an ice cream, shop, or doing something in technology. What I think is transferable is the fact that there are some skills that sort of, in my mind, elevate a regular candidate or an employee to a super employee or a super contributor. And these are things that I look for when I'm talking to people for the first time or evaluating their skill sets or taking a look at case studies of things that they've been involved in. I'm looking for kind of a few things that I'd like to see come together. And I'm happy to share a couple of those if you like.
No, please.
Yeah, go ahead and share. I was going to ask, what would you say were the top 3 or 5 traits that you really look for when you're looking at these resumes?
Right. So, we talked about this earlier, but I think this idea of intuition on one hand, having a sense, recognizing patterns, seeing things that might be coming up or around the corner, being able to see around the corner. So the intuition plus adaptability is one of the huge things that I think is super, super critical. If you want to go into a company or an industry that is very prescriptive, say it's an engineer or legal or medical and so on, you can follow historic employees and thought leaders through that industry and do a really good job. But if you're in an environment where every 6 months things are shifting and there's new rules applying and there are new vendors and there are new players and there's new engagement models, then your ability to be adaptable is one of the most critical things you can possibly do. Not being so set on your own rules and regulations that you can't think outside the box or challenge your own prescriptive thoughts to be able to do something differently. So that's the first thing. I love seeing people that are, have intuition. They make a guess, they make a bet, they back it up with data, and then they are adaptable, right? That's one thing I really love seeing. Go ahead.
Oh, no. On the adaptability part, what can job seekers do to adapt their, whether their skills or, how do they look forward in making themselves attractive to other companies?
Yeah.
And how does adaptability relate to them?
I think it's asking yourself, where have I been adaptable in my previous jobs or in my life? Where can I point to situations where I was okay with being uncomfortable with unstable waters, right? The analogy I like to think of is big field of ice. If you're up in the North Pole, it's pretty solid. There's not a lot of cracks going on. But the further south you go, all of a sudden big pieces start breaking off and it gets smaller and smaller. And you're not on stable ground all the time, right? So ask yourself, where have I been adaptable where it wasn't the way I wanted it to go? We shifted, we made a change, we used data to inform ourselves, and then we went down the next path. If you can talk to some of those things, that would be really, really valuable.
Yeah, one thing that, and I want to hear the rest of the list that you have in terms of things that you look for, Devrin. But entrepreneurs, founders, folks that are maybe transitioning from more of the entrepreneurial startup environment to something that's more established. Sometimes they have this stigma. They carry this stigma where folks that are looking at these folks that are coming from these areas as maybe potential flight risks, or they might not be cultural, they might be cultural misfits because they're too entrepreneurial, they're going to leave as soon as things go well, or they want to pursue their own idea, and I guess how can hiring managers think about that, or, what are some things they should consider versus, as well as candidates, candidates that have been working for a startup, maybe they were a founder of their own company, but for some reason it went under. And now they're looking for an opportunity, at a more established company.
Yep.
Just wondering what your thoughts might be there.
Look, I view people will find their own people. If you are seeking folks in a very established career path and you are in an established career path, you're going to be attractive to them in that sense. And that may work, right? If you have a entrepreneurial background, or if you've tried things and they've failed, or you have gone out on a limb and it didn't work, I almost consider that a badge of honor, right? Like you've rebounded, you've had to make it work, you've been in a situation where you're maybe out of work and now you're like have to find something else happening. Those people are resourceful. And I like resourceful people because they're the sort of people that say, hey, what challenge do you need solved? Not what tasks do you need me to complete? Right? I want resourceful people that on their own effort are going to find things. So I wouldn't worry about being an entrepreneur if somebody doesn't understand you in that sense. You know, it's up to you to actually explain what you did as an entrepreneur through some of these lenses, which I think will help hiring managers understand.
Yeah, for sure. The rest of your list, we'd love to hear it. Sorry to cut you off.
There's a couple more. So I mean, they're interrelated, but you know, if you are adaptable and you've got intuition, then generally you've got a growth mindset, right? Your idea is, what are we doing to move the ball forward every single day? How are we improving the culture of our company? How are we improving our product usability? How are we integrating feedback from customers to make us better? Right? This lack of complacency to say, well, it's working fine, we're in a good spot, let's just leave it until something breaks. I think this idea of growth mindset is always challenging the status quo and moving yourself to a positive space to say, hey, when we have time, I think this is a really rich opportunity. I think we should explore this area over here. You know, not being settled with one, you know, once it's in a good spot. So growth mindset is number 2. I like seeing people that have that mindset. They're generally on the positive side of the spectrum when it comes to optimism versus, you know, pessimism.
Could I just say one thing about that? I've found that when I surround myself with people that have a growth mindset, like it inspires me to have more of a
That's
growth
right.
mindset.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It
I mean,
inspires,
I think you
yeah.
both you two have it. You know, you're doing things outside of your norm. You're pivoting. You're not afraid to do that. You know, it might be risky, but you're trying it, right? And that's what people, I think, can add more of. You know, get outside your comfort zone. Take a few risks. It's okay. It's not going to damage your relationship and your persona, right?
Yeah.
Just do it through the right lens.
Yeah.
And
Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
oh no, I was just gonna say it's exciting because we end up attracting people who are also in the growth mindset. So that's something that I've noticed, and I get excited when I see somebody who is all growth mindset, trying to figure things out. I mean, and I there's somebody that I've been working with that she's a job seeker, and I just get excited. You know, I think of me investing some time to help her, and she helps me. It's exciting, and somebody
Right.
who is more, I guess, the opposite of growth mindset, someone who's stagnant and they're
That's
just kind
right.
of sitting there. They're a little bit more negative, and so it's just the wavelengths don't jive well,
That's
and
right.
so I'm not really attracted to them. And so
Sure.
I think that's part of why we've been really excited about you, Devrin, is because
Yeah.
you've got that growth mindset and we've got the same wavelength going on.
Wow. Well, paying it forward is a great way to do, bringing growth mindset to the equation. It's not looking for what's in it for me immediately. It's like, it's putting it yourself out there. Good things will happen to good people that want good things to happen to other good people, right?
Yeah.
It's true, right? We're here to lift all tides. So I think that growth mindset is very contagious, and it allows people to extend their boundaries to try themselves, even if they're not always super growth mindset. If they're surrounded by leaders that feel that growth and trial and error is okay and acceptable, I can't tell you how many people have come to me after the hours and said, "Hey, I worked on this just because I thought I could solve it. I wanted to try, and it's got wires hanging out. It's not great, but look what I found out here." And you're like, "Fantastic, great job, keep going." Right?
Yeah, we have a 1.5-year-old, right? And it's just amazing to see this guy stumbling and falling and keep on trying. It's like, if kids, we were born innately with a
That's right.
growth mindset, right? We wouldn't survive otherwise.
Yeah.
But at some point, into adulthood, we feel like we got it dialed, and we just kind of repeat those patterns, thinking that those patterns, if we repeat them, will just lead to us thriving.
Yes.
But because the environment, especially nowadays with technology, is evolving so rapidly, in order to thrive, even maybe I might even argue, in order to survive, you have to sort of embrace a growth mindset,
That's right.
because what's worked in the past is not necessarily going to work in the future. So, yeah. Sorry
Right.
to Devin, cut you off again. I know you have other ones that you want to touch on, but I
Sure.
think this is great.
So we'll keep going. I got two more, and I know we're getting close on time here, but intuition and adaptability are really important. Growth mindset comes with that, and that's a positive thing to keep track of. The other thing that I think is really important is when you're thinking about product market fit, and when you're thinking about building your product or service, and you're trying to find the right ideal customer profile to go out there with. One of the things that I think I look for and is really important is for folks to really fall in love with the problem that they're trying to solve and not fall in love with their solution, right? It's a hard one to do because everyone loves their own baby, right? But if you're falling in love with what you're trying to solve first and all the pain points of the customers who are your potential customers, then what you're doing is you're leaning into actually trying to make a huge difference, right? And there's a great book that came out by the founder of Waze, which was bought by Google, who talks about this. And he's like, I was trying to create a traffic app forever, and I thought I had the best tools and the smartest, slickest interface. But he said, but it wasn't working. And it wasn't until he fell in love with the problem and really became somebody on the other side that would be using his product that he started to excel. Right.
Yeah, I guess connecting and empathizing with your target user, right? Kind of what you're touching
Even
on.
more than that, it's like you become so inextricably linked to the problem that you are solving that you can't get your head out of any other way other than living through the pain of what your users might be trying to experience.
Yeah.
Right.
And so this is kind of interesting because you're talking about a product market fit from a company standpoint. How would you say this would fit from a job seeker standpoint? Meaning, how do you figure out what's your product market fit out in the market? And I can see if you're so attached to your baby, it's your baby, you've been let's say, recruiter or a marketer forever. How do you change that mindset, and how do you figure out what the product market fit is?
Well, as an example, if you're a candidate and you're looking for job opportunities and you're maybe zeroing in on a handful, one of the things I'd be doing is I would be really interrogating what is their product market offering and asking myself really tough questions about, hey, how much have you thought about all the different dynamics of this problem that you're trying to solve, and bring new ideas to the equation, even in your interview. It's like asking it in a proactive way. Hey, how are you guys thinking about using AI to, augment this part of your business, if it relates to, say, customer service? Let's pick one out. And thinking of proactive ideas, again, this is your intuition, your growth mindset, bringing good ideas to the table that are really reinforcing falling in love with the problem rather than just bolting on extra functionality to an existing product. Right?
Yeah.
Yep. So the last one I would probably put in this bucket is, it's great to strategize and pontificate and to think about great ideas and wouldn't it be wonderful to do this? That's really good, but strategy without execution is pretty empty. And so what I like to look at and evaluate and really interrogate when I'm interviewing people is, talk to me about, where you came up with a great idea, where you had a growth mindset, where you identified a new space, and then take me through the whole level of execution. So walk me through, what is the programmatic approach to having an idea, to productizing it, to testing the product market fit, and then actually completing the task. Because if you don't if you can't execute, there's no point in having these strategic discussions.
Yeah. You see that a lot, right? About folks that are able to talk a big game, but they're not putting pen to paper. And so that piece is really important.
Yeah.
So let's see. Is there anything else, Michelle, that you want to dig into?
No, I mean, the biggest, well, actually, one other thing so Devrin, I know that your career has been really successful. And I'm kind of curious, what areas would you say were your pivoting points in your career or things that you struggled that really defined your career to what it is today?
Yep. Well, I think one of the big ones was going into the advertising space. And I didn't know what I didn't know. I got recruited away from Microsoft in a purely technology, business role, and I had to do the same thing inside the agency. I actually went and started an agency with David Droga, which became Droga 5, one of the most awarded creative agencies in the world. And I don't think I knew enough about what it's like to be on the agency side, sitting with brands, learning what it's like to actually manage and cherish and hold a brand's ethos in your hands and being able to shape and move that. That was a big change for me, and I didn't adapt to that right away very easily. It took me a while to unwire my thinking and to move into a more creative, less tactical, execution based. That was a big one for me, and I didn't think I didn't think it would be that hard. Working on Madison Avenue after that, in those big agencies, seeing how they made money, how they worked, that was an eye-opening exercise for me. I realized how they made money and how I could help them, but agency life was not really where I felt was my best foot. I liked what products are they missing in a technology sense that we could build out for them and then partner with them or sell to them or bolt on as a white labeled, whatever that offering was. That was one of the big ones for me.
Yeah. And I think, pivots really a lot of it are the turning points in people's careers. And I'm like, right now, what Eric was saying is that right now it is a tough time for a lot of people. And during this time, it's, these pivots are what really make you kind of put you on a different trajectory. But sometimes those pivots are what you need because it lands you into something that you would never have thought otherwise.
Right. And they're hard, right? Let's face it. You're going out of your comfort zone. You're taking a risk. You might not have any financial gain from that for quite some time. And you ask yourself, there's a lot of self-doubt that goes through your mind. Is this the right path? Should I go back to something more familiar? But if you have real conviction and you genuinely believe that you're on the right track here and you're going from a place of good and you're going from a place of lifting others as well, you've got a chance of actually making that come to life. And I would say stick with it. It's sometimes really hard, but it's worth it if you can break through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Those are all golden nuggets. So I'm taking them in.
That's the tough part is how do you do that? How do you learn to let go and of what you thought worked in the past to taking a chance on something that may or may not work and putting your heart and soul into that. And I think there's something to be said about, again, surrounding yourself with people that have a growth mindset that can inspire you, that can, help you check your blind spots, but also not just rah you, right?
Yeah.
But can tell you the good and the bad. Like, you're missing this blind spot, or, it feels
and
like
honestly, sorry to interrupt, but that's one of the big ones as well, is working with people you trust, and people that can call you out or that you can be very open and candid with. I think that's a big part of it. I was fortunate to be working for the last 4 years with some really, really great founders, and people that I just would go in the trenches with. We had each other's backs, and that is something that I'm definitely not compromising on wherever I go next. I'm going to make sure that the people that I'm involved with are people that I want to hang out with, that I want to spend time with, because let's face it, you're going to probably spend as much time in your job life as you do in your personal life. You got to like these people.
Yeah. You got to figure out who to let into your circle and who to, keep at bay.
That's it.
Devrin, you've had an amazing career, and I'm looking forward to all the good things you'll be pursuing in the future. And we're going to follow you, and we hope that we can keep you in our circle as
Sure.
one of our close friends and inspirations as we pursue an increasing and growing growth mindset.
For sure. And I want to extend that to listeners too. Like if you want to reach out to me, we're going to provide you my LinkedIn details and stuff like that. Reach out. I'll be glad to help out. And we can go from there.
I've included in the links, so people can go ahead and reach out to you, Devrin.
Fantastic, guys! It's wonderful to be with you. Hope we get some ski time in this year.
For sure.
Let me know if there's any particular other follow up that we want to do.
Okay.
All right. I appreciate your time, Devrin.
Excellent. Thanks again.
Thank you all out there. We will be posting this. It'll be available on Spotify as well as iTunes or Apple Podcasts, and follow us in LinkedIn. And we look forward to our next webinar soon.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.